All right, good evening. Welcome to After the Buzzer. Utah Hockey Club loses to the Vegas Golden Knights by a score of 4-2. My name is Keith Shirts. You can see it right there. And I am the guy that runs Hive State Hockey. I have done play-by-play in hockey, big hockey fan, watched it my entire life, and love talking a little bit of hockey. So if you have found us for the first time tonight, welcome. It's good to see you, friend. If you're back, good to see you again, friend. So thanks for coming the last time. Thanks for being here tonight. Well, finishing games, right? I mean, I hate to do it. I hate to just talk about the youth again, but here we go. Utah Hockey Club goes down, score 4-2. They give up 4 straight goals to the Vegas Golden Knights as the Knights are able to parlay a set of penalties to get their way back in the game and be effective on the power play. Thomas Hertl gets 2 goals tonight on the power play in the second period, or 1 in the second, 1 in the third, bringing his team back into the game. And then, the momentum had shifted, and that effort came through. A great deflection goal by William Karlsson. Wild Bill is just an awesome player. He's just a sublime hockey player for the Vegas Golden Knights. I really, really like watching him play. And then Karlsson iced it with the empty netter. So Karlsson, 2 goals in the final 2 minutes of the game, and Thomas Hertl with 2 power play goals tonight. And the penalties and the inability to kill power plays off, the penalty kill, that is the thing that dooms the Utah Hockey Club tonight after a lot of promising play earlier in the game. One of the things that's so frustrating is that there's times where you get these little glimpses and you can see it. You can just see what they are. You could see what they have the opportunity to be. But the problem is that it's just not a consistent unit, and there just isn't enough happening night in and night out. And in terms of consistency, though, the thing is you can blame youth, you can blame inexperience, but what's the most consistent line that the Utah Hockey Club rolls with game in and game out? I think it's quite clear that it's whatever line Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther play on. So the 21-year-old Gunther, the 20-year-old Logan Cooley, you could talk about inconsistency and blame the youth on that. Obviously, Michael Kesselring, who I love his game. I love what he's brought to the Utah Hockey Club so far this season. But one of the things that I just can't stand, one of the things that stinks, is that that penalty that he had where the stick got around him. And again, that's just tough. Sometimes that happens, and he's playing. He got that hooking call, but the hooking minor against Keegan Colasar, that changed things. It led to the power play goal, and then in the second. In the third period, the second power play goal, I think, was the Maverick Lamoureux cross-check. And so a couple of the young defensemen taking kind of bad penalties, in particular that Maverick Lamoureux one, and also really the one by Kesselring wasn't necessary either, because it's Colasar. And while, he can score here or there, you're behind the net, him getting his stick on the puck and doing things from behind, like of the players on the Vegas Golden Knights that you don't fear from a playmaking perspective and being behind the net. Keegan Colasar is not one of those players. He's very good in many other ways. That's not a player you need to worry about when you're behind the net. And so, a couple bad penalties by the young guys. That ends up dooming the Utah Hockey Club. They're not able to capitalize on what was a very strong performance until penalties turned around. Lamoureux went to the box twice. His first interference penalty was not necessary. either, and it's just one of those things where that was the moment that started some of the momentum shift going the other way about halfway through the game. First 30 minutes, it was all Utah Hockey Club. They were able to get up 2-0. I thought that the work that was put in to get the goals was really excellent. Obviously, Dylan Gunther holding the puck in at the blue line, having to come through down to Michelli. Michelli had the quick pass out to Logan Cooley, who just sniped that thing. It was a great goal. So Logan Cooley likes playing against the Vegas Golden Knights. I believe he scored in the previous encounter with them. But, Logan Cooley, just hard work, getting better at defense all the time, skates so hard, plays so hard. I'm really encouraged by all the things I see out of Logan Cooley. It's just one of the things that is frustrating with the group as a whole is it looks like that Cooley, Gunther, Michelli line is probably the line. The other question then is well, what do you do with Nick Schmaltz, who will never score? And the announcers are doing him no favors because one of the big conversation points the last 2-3 games now has been how Nick Schmaltz cannot score the puck. And that's not helpful. I mean, I know he can't, and it's just true, so there's nothing wrong with that. He hasn't scored all year. But now we're making a big fuss because he skates back hard. And he did a good job back checking and all that, but he always does a good job skating back hard. And today he did a better job of taking away opportunities on his back checks. But at the same time, this is a team that's walked out on that ice, 17 times now. They've come away with 7 wins. And, 7 wins, 7 losses, 3 loser points, 7-10. This is not a strong hockey team. And through 17 games, 3 wins in regulation. That is not, it's not a strong hockey team. They're 5th right now in the Central Division. They are just barely outpacing what you're getting from the Chicago Blackhawks and St. Louis Blues. Nashville obviously has had their woeful start to the season. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Nashville because I think they're better than what they've shown. But yeah, so look, I think from a points, they've taken away half the points, 17 points through 17 games, 82 points. For the overall season, if they continued their point per game average, I don't believe that was enough to get in the playoffs last year. I'll do a quick check. Yeah, it is not enough to make the playoffs. Yeah. So last year you needed 98 points to get in. So they are, behind the 8 ball. We're almost a quarter of way through the season. So they've got to find a way to get going. Now, The opening of the season has been brutal. I mean, they've had lots of difficult games early in the season. They've had lots of games, some road trips, some quick homestands, and going out back on the road. So I think, when I did the video at the beginning of the season, before the season started, I made a big fuss about that. I thought the Utah Hockey Club was going to start slow and then really have an opportunity to pick it up. And if you'll just give me a second, I'd like to open that real quick. Let me take a look at what we had there. So yeah, I just think so as it relates to the Utah Hockey Club, early in the season, through November, I had them picking up 10 wins with 14 losses, with 2 loser points. So they're doing a little better on the loser point front. They're doing just fine in terms of that. The issue, of course, is down the stretch here over the next 2 weeks is can they find a way to pick up 3 more wins? That'll be interesting to see. But they would be on track, and of course what I predicted was for them to miss the playoffs. But I think what's going to happen is they're going to have a little bit of a rough go of it in the early phases of the season. And, this is one of those games where, when you take a look at where they were on this was a game that I think that they needed to try to find a way to get it done. They had a little bit of a rest advantage over Vegas. They had more time to kind of prepare for the game, but again, that Carolina game was an emotional game. I think it maybe took quite a bit out of the Utah Hockey Club, but one of the things that I think is super fascinating to look at is just that they've been right there with Vegas, but then have melted down as it goes on. And part of that is, having vets and using veterans along the way. The other part of this is that it enables you to have these struggles because there isn't that steadying force that is going to make the Utah Hockey Club find a way to pull out games when you get out to a 2-0 lead. They are not a good penalty killing team, and they continue to go to box too much, and also the times at which they're going to the box, that really hurts. So yeah, I mean, they've got a tremendous ability to skate. They've got a tremendous ability to have opportunities start to go in their way. But as things currently are constructed with this team, it becomes an interesting topic of conversation to begin looking at what is it that you accomplish as things go along. So they were worried about playing the kids and having too much trouble on the blue line. And maybe there's, actually, I think it's a really fair conversation to have is, we're going to move on from this. 2 goals for Carlson, 2 goals for Hurdle, a goal for Sergachev, a goal for Cooley. I thought Sergachev and Cooley's goals were great skill goals. Good for Sergachev for stepping up and finding that snipe wrister. That was pretty awesome. What a goal. Love Mikhail Sergachev. He's awesome. Great player. And, Cooley, obviously, it's so fun to watch him continue to come along and continue to kind of be electrifying on the ice. But one of the things that I think is worth, trying to understand is if they go and get Olimata because Sean Durzee's out and because, John Marino's not going to be available till later in the season, it must have been the case that they were like, if we play Vlad Kolyachonok, obviously we're not in a position to really play Bortuzzo the way that we would be required to. Maybe he was signing up to be a 7 and only play, a game here or there. He was going to be on the backup goalie schedule, basically, was the idea. And he was playing a lot of games early on, so they made the trade. They give the 3rd round pick. They get Olimata back, and I'm assuming that the conversation that Bill Armstrong had was, can our players continue to develop in the way that they need to if the blue line is going to be, Sergachev playing 30 minutes a night? Can they develop in the way that they need to if you're going to have Lamoureux and Kolyachonok and, the reclamation project of Juuso Valimaki? And, what is the plan as it relates to that? And the other part of this is can you bring along the young guys? Because if they're always just in their own zone, part of it is they got to learn how to generate and create goals in the offensive end of the ice. So the question is what are you going to do in order to do that? And so they clearly made the choice that they didn't think that they could continue to develop their guys and field a competitive team without going and getting somebody like Olimata. And Olimata's been very steady, very good, very steady. He's a nice player, and he's been a good, strong addition to that second line. Tonight, I think he played most of his minutes with Sergachev, which I thought was interesting. They're giving Kesselring more of a chance to try to, patrol and take care of business on that second line and maybe build some chemistry out with the kids and continue to go through that process. But I am just a little bit baffled in terms of the rebuild conversation. Because the question would have been that you don't bring veteran who's won 2 Stanley Cups, Ole Mata, into the lineup after you just traded for 2 guys and, okay, you had bad luck because of an injury. You had bad luck because of another injury. And you don't have Marino. You don't have Durzi. And so they must be concerned about their ability to find ways to continue to develop their team without the sort of stability on the blue line to make it so that they can be in circumstances which enable them to grow. That has to be what the reasoning was of that scenario. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, other than, we've also watched what's happened in Anaheim, and they just continue to throw out kid after kid after kid after kid, and for whatever reason it never comes around for the Ducks, does it? So I think it's a fascinating problem for Utah Hockey Club. I think that the process that they've decided to do in going that way enables them to be slightly more competitive. But really, the bigger issue to me is they've got some choices to make. And it's early in the season, but they're going to have, and we'll really know because December is going to be the month. I have December as their most productive month of the year in what I predicted and in terms of the way the schedule shapes up for them. This has been a rough start, right? I mean, this month in November, there's been 4 home games and 9 away games. So the second half of this month is going to be really a difficult stretch of games when it comes down to it. They have the game against Washington that's coming up on Monday, but then they go on this road trip, right? They go to Boston, they go to Pittsburgh, they go to Toronto, right? When they play Toronto, it's a back-to-back. It's their 3rd game in 4 nights. Like, that's a loss probably. They're going to play Montreal again. That's another 3rd game in 4 nights. Montreal's not super great, but we'll see what happens. And then we have a game back at home against Edmonton. We welcome in McDavid. Then they're back on the road again, and they're playing the Vegas Golden Knights in their building at T-Mobile. So, that is the rest of this month. Washington at home. Washington's playing good. They are having a good beginning of their season. Boston on the road, not as good as Boston has been usually, but that's going to be a tough building. Also, when you just travel East Coast, that 2 time zone travel seems to affect teams. And then, obviously, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Montreal. That 4-game road trip, the question is of the 8 possible points, they have, through the season, been able to get 1 point per game. And so the question is will they come away from that road trip with 4 points? That will be a really, really interesting thing to see develop. I don't think so. I think they are struggling as it is anyway. They are fighting their way through some things. But this is not a team that, to me, has... They're goofy because they might be able to tell themselves that the Toronto game is this back-to-back, a 3rd game in 4 nights. Toronto's quite good. You got to deal with Matthews and Marner and Tavares and Nylander and so on and so forth. And I could see them maybe squeaking a point out or finding a way to win that game and then going and playing, Montreal And while they have a couple nice players on their team, Nick Suzuki is not Austin Matthews, and Brendan Gallagher, is not Marner. Like, the point is like, but they might slip and fall against a team like Montreal, To have a performance the way they did against Carolina, and really, I actually think that's a misnomer, because I called it a performance, and it was and from a scoreline perspective, that was a nice win. But really, the issue with that game is that it ended up being the case that Carolina really controlled most of that game. They had shot after shot after shot after shot. It was just that Karel Vejmelka stole the game for them. Came back down to earth a little bit, played more like what we see from Karel Vejmelka, gave them a chance and an opportunity to win, let 3 pucks by. That's okay. That's one of those things. If you only give up 3 goals, you have a pretty decent chance to win. But Aiden Hill only gave up 2 goals. And so typically you ought to be able to find 3 into the net. That's probably what is, a reasonable expectation of like an average performance. And anything lower than that is a really good night, and anything higher than that is not such a good night. Like, Vejmelka was fine tonight. I think he continued to play with a lot of confidence. But again, he faced all these shots, and they had to grind it out and find a way to get a puck by him. And they were only able to do it on the man advantage. And then the other goal that they scored was this awesome deflected goal that goes in the back of the net for William Karlsson. So I thought that Vejmelka played pretty well. But the consistency of the overall team, and that's the thing. It's like the NHL, like, all these teams have players. They're all, they're all fielding teams on the ice, and it doesn't look like there's any like total bomb teams this year. Like last year, there's some real like crummy teams, and like teams where it was easy to get points off, like Chicago. Like they were garbage. They're really bad. And Anaheim was, real bad. And so, Columbus was like, they were bad. So there were teams to go and grab easy-ish points. And it seems like every team in the NHL like kind of took a step forward. The league at large does not have as many teams that are comfortable with the developmental, like, just kind of not being very good phase of like their franchise's life cycle. The patience for being bad for these teams that have been bad is waning thin. Although, Anaheim may never do anything to ever win at a high level ever again. It feels like. But the point is that I wonder where this projects. And the biggest thing is that they've got 2 more weeks of this month to fight through some difficulties, some tough games against some good Eastern Conference teams before they then have to face the Oilers and then Vegas again. And then they start December off against the Dallas Stars. Like, there's several things within this process that are going to make it, really, really difficult for Utah if they don't find ways to steal points here. And there's a real chance that this next stretch of the schedule could get kind of bleak. It could get pretty tough. So if they can hang in there and find a way to squeeze out 3 more victories along the way here, I think that would be right on track of kind of what I was thinking was going to happen with this team. But I also thought that they were going to be able to squeak out some more wins up to this point. This was not a stretch of the season I did think that it was going to go well in. So it's a really interesting time to kind of see where they go. Now, this is like way too early So if you want to say, hey, this is too early and maybe we shouldn't be talking about these things yet, my friend, I'm willing to listen to that criticism. But for the sake of just forecasting for just a moment, when the NHL trade deadline comes, one of the things that Bill Armstrong has been very clear about needing to do is anyone that's expiring that is not part of the prime time, winning time of this franchise is going to get dealt for assets. To the extent that any of these players are desirable at the trade deadline, I just want to go over the people I might think you could move on at this trade deadline. I think the number one overall prospect in terms of who Utah Hockey Club may be trading at the trade deadline, if they are sellers by that point of the season, and I think they will be, because you may as well get something for this asset. Making the playoffs is really not what the goal is. The goal is to try to continue to build the kids to play in some meaningful games down the stretch, and then be able to still build to that team and have the opportunity to acquire, either distressed assets, players who maybe need a change of scenery, maybe somebody with an injury and the team is really in win now, and so maybe you take a risk there, or just a bunch of trade capital. But the first guy that I think may be appealing to other teams is Nick Bjugstad. He is a unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. With that expiring contract comes the opportunity for another team who's in the mix to add a player to their third or fourth line who's pretty good at the circle, who skates hard, who checks hard, who can give you like full-on traditional like third line center energy, but with the potential upside of getting you a couple more clutch goals. He feels like he might be like a playoff kind of player. So that's Nick Bjugstad. I think there's a very strong chance that he will get traded before the end of the year. Another one, and it's just measuring out age and when Utah Hockey Club is going to be playing the most meaningful games and what you hope to build to with Dylan Guenther, with Logan Cooley. But Alex Kerfoot also is an expiring contract. His is a little bit more difficult. He has a conditional no trade clause, so he needs to go to a situation that he would approve. However, if there is a team getting ready for a Stanley Cup playoff run who needs a penalty killer, who needs a player that will be versatile in many ways, I think there's a very good chance that Alex Kerfoot would be an interesting player to a lot of those teams. So I think he's the second most likely. And then there's a chance that they could flip Olimata again. I believe that the league rules say that that's okay. But I think that Olimata could be another player that gets flipped at the trade deadline. Ian Cole could potentially get flipped at the trade deadline, although I don't think that Ian Cole is playing well enough. For instance, Ian Cole was the person who made the error defensively that led to one of Thomas Hertl's goals on the power play. He positioned himself in the penalty kill. He positioned himself in a way where he got out of the play, wasn't able to recover from that, and allowed basically a 5-on-3 scenario, which ended up being a goal. I personally don't think Ian Cole brings enough for a contending team to feel like this gives us a better chance to win a title. So I'd be surprised to see Ian Cole be something that a team would trade for. I do think Olimata might, though. I think that Olimata gives a team to potentially improve one of their defensive pairings with stability with, that grit, that hard-nosed element that Olimata can bring. And then two more kind of wild card in terms of unrestricted free agents who are expiring. Though I think it's unlikely. Michael Carcone is expiring. He's definitely of the guys that might be healthy scratches between Liam O'Brien and him, and even when they had Yamamoto up from the AHL. Like, Carcone is definitely the best option on that fourth line for Utah. He gives you a little offensive pop. He's playing better defense this season. I think that Michael Carcone could potentially be traded, but at the same time, like, if he's a fourth liner on the Utah Hockey Club, is he playing for a team that's in the mix? Like, probably not. But if a team really needs like depth offense and scoring, like maybe. But Carcone's not scored yet this year. He hasn't played in very many games, but he looked dangerous tonight. He had periods and stretches of time where I really thought that Michael Carcone played well. And then the last one is if there's injuries in net, Karel Vejmelka. The beloved veggie. Would Karel Vejmelka end up getting moved if a team needs goalie depth? If there's an injury that comes along or something happens for one of these other teams, there is a chance that Karel Vejmelka's expiring contract could result in him getting traded for some assets that come back the other way and provide an opportunity for another team to get some depth at their goalie position. So those are the candidates. And if you want me to rank them, I think Bukestad and Kerfoot. If Utah Hockey Club's not firmly in the playoffs, like if they're not in a playoff spot, there's no way that Bill Armstrong's gonna not try to shop them. Whether they find the right deal is a whole other thing, but they're definitely getting shopped at the trade deadline. Olimata, if the league allows that, I know that if you've already been traded, there's sometimes like a delay rule. I don't know that that's true though for NHL. But anyway, I think Olimata might get traded. I could see another team wanting to do that. Ian Cole, I don't really see it. Carcone, I don't really see it. And if there was injuries, I think Karel Vejmelka may be a possibility to be traded for at the deadline. Okay. And I'll give you some more left field, although I don't know that the trade deadline is really the time for it. And I think this is too wild. I do think it's too wild, but I'll just do this because, hey, we're fans, we're having fun here. But is there a case to be made to sell high on Clayton Keller? Like, I think his reputation of what he is like maybe greater than what he actually is. Like, I think he gets credit for like having good company. Like the fact that he, hangs out with and practices with Austin Matthews in the off season. I think that like improves his brand. I think there's been a lot of like, well, he'd be a huge star if he hadn't been playing in Arizona and Utah this time. But like, I'm not in love with his game. I don't love the things that he brings. I think he's talented at putting the puck in the net. He's clearly shown that. But he's a good stats, bad team guy. Like he is. He's not a warrior like back checker. I don't know. I just think to have the captain of your team be a player who's just so one-sided in the way that he approaches the game. He can't lead emotionally because he won't play a physical game. He isn't going to be like blocking shots for your team. Like usually when you think of like a hockey captain, like you think of a guy who has the ability to lay the body here or there and make some clutch plays and, plays smart and is always in support and a great back checker who can then, go to the net and does the hard work of trying to get rebounds and just dirty goals and like playing in that style. And when you look at like all the other captains in the NHL, like typically you have a captain who is sort of this hard-nosed kind of player. Like, you look at Stone for the Vegas Golden Knights because we played them. Or, yeah, I mean, I think that's key. Or Roman Josi he's not a forward, but like you look at the style of play and what he brings for Nashville. If you look at what Ovi has brought in Washington as we come through, or Marchand, right, in Boston, Crosby, he doesn't just play one way or the other. Like Austin Matthews is the new captain at Toronto, and he's definitely like a two-way, like Selke level defensive player, in addition to being a guy that can score like 1 million goals. Nick Suzuki is like a tough player on Montreal as you go through it. Like, McDavid, he does both sides of the ice and he goes those ways. But I don't know. I guess the point I'm getting at is that like if you look at like NHL captains, like the best analogy for like having Clayton Keller as your captain is maybe Mark Scheifele, but like not as physical. But Mark Scheifele like doesn't care about playing defense for the Winnipeg Jets. So, yeah. I mean, look, there's the other argument that's like captaincy is kind of a stupid construct. These are all professional hockey players. And the idea that like, I don't see Clayton Keller skating hard on the back check, so I'm not gonna. Like, okay, it's probably not really that strong of an impulse for the other players on the team. But at the same time, like, gosh, like if there's some, like, I mean, he's the one that's going to get to lift the cup, right? I mean, if they were to be so fortunate. And don't you want a guy that, anyway, like you can't tell me that Sasha Barkov for Florida, like doesn't change the overall personality and attitude of that team with the way that he approaches both ends of the ice. It's like you put points on the board, you get nice contracts. And Clayton Keller plays that way. So, the question I wonder is if you were to shop him, if you put him out there, he's on his 5th year of an 8-year deal. So there'd be 3 more years left on it. That deal gets more attractive as the more time goes on, as the salary cap continues to increase. That is probably the main reason why you don't move Clayton Keller, is because you have a potential 30-goal scorer who gives you 30 goals at a price that will become better and better as each season goes on over these next 3 years. But something to think about. You could potentially sell high on him at this point, and I think you could get something pretty good, pretty significant from going and getting something for Clayton Keller. I think some team would absolutely overpay for that player. So just from a asset acquisition and opportunity standpoint, I think that it's an interesting thought and worth consideration, and I think there's merit to that. From a reality standpoint, I don't see it. I think that they've tried to market him as a key player here and long term to this future of this team, and to trade your captain within a few months of like making him captain, like, yeah, trading a captain's like always kind of dicey anyhow. But I think it's worth floating for a second that if the point is that we're still rebuilding and we're trying to get there, and we've got another year or two before we're actually kind of to the point where it's time to really win. Why not? Why not? Especially if you think that Gunther is definitely like a top level number one like sniper player. Especially because if you like what Barrett Hayton's giving you, or especially if you think you need yet another center to help bring along some of the other guys that you have, like again the guys they just drafted, like Cole Baldwin, he's probably a third line center. Ultimately, he's kind of like Nick Bukestad, frankly. I think T.J. Ginla has an opportunity to be like a really great like second line or even a first line like winger and bring you along in those ways. And so the question is like, do you have like top 6 centers in the system? Well, yeah, you have Hayton and you have Cooley. And the question is as you build this team, because this is what we're, a lot of times on these post games, I'm spending my time talking about the game and about the tactics and the things that they're doing. But really, at the end of the day, like the broad picture of this season is that I would love to see playoff hockey, but that's because I'm a fan and it would be fun and I'm not patient or whatever. But I do think that there's some real reason to do more of this sort of conversation about what are the chessboard moves to get to that great finale where you have a cup contending team. And do we believe that Clayton Keller, from a physical standpoint, from a attitude standpoint, from a workhorse, from a balanced, on the ice standpoint, can he be your best player, your top guy, the captain of the team, and help you get to that point? Well, look, that's a really unfair question. Most captains of most franchises don't take their team to that point. But if you are willing to take a look at what has worked, what style of play does translate to that ratcheted up physical playoff style, I don't really see where Clayton Keller helps in that manner. And frankly, like it's one of the important things that we need to see from Cooley and Gunther. They're going to need to get a lot stronger as the years go on. Kesselring too. Maverick Lamoureux needs to put on some muscle. Like he's too lanky, right? And without giving up his skating ability, like he's got to find a way to get a lot more strength, especially down low. I mean, if we're talking for a second, he's 6'7". He has many skills that are awesome. Maverick Lamoureux does, but one of the issues he has is because he's so high and he's on his skates, like his center of gravity is so high. So I think he needs like more strength in his core and his legs and through his trunk, and have the ability to be able to stay on the puck and not be moved around as easily as he currently is able to be moved around. So yeah. Look, I'm not sure that the physicality of the regular season NHL season is something that Clayton Keller's up for. He's not physical anyway. Like he survives these seasons by staying on the outside. So if we're unsure that the physicality of regular season hockey is something that, can be kept up with, if you're trying to get those 16 wins in the Stanley Cup playoff with the amount of like brutality that happens at that part, it's like, does he translate to that? Because he's not young. He's not, he is. He's still a young player, but he's not 20. We're not trying to figure out what's it going to project to be. Like, we're kind of seeing what prime Clayton Keller should be or is like. And I don't see the development of an attitude or a will to play warrior-like hockey. To be really, really committed to not worrying about points on your end, but doing all the things to help the team find out where they need to get to. So, anyway, it's something worth talking about. And then if you're just interested, projecting next year, like, yeah, Nick Schmaltz is getting traded next year. Like, he'll be an expiring contract, and he'll definitely get traded before the trade deadline as well. That is if he ever figures out how to score another goal ever again in his career. All right. That is it for tonight's episode of After the Buzzer. Thanks for stopping by, swinging in, and tuning in. Appreciate your time and your hanging out. So that is it for tonight's edition. The Utah Hockey Club fall to the Vegas Golden Knights by a score of 4-2, and they allow a great big comeback to take them out and end it. So. That's how that one ends. We will see you Monday night following the game against Alexander Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. Take it easy.